Thank you for welcoming us onto your headphones. I am Alex.
And I'm Eddie, reviewing The Platform. And this is The Rollback. In the most depressing detention film since The Breakfast Club, The Platform is about Goreng, a young man who finds himself in a 335-story building, The Pit. Each level has a small living space with 2 beds and a sink, and in the middle of them is a hole. Each day, once, a platform is lowered through the entire building containing a lavish feast. As it stops on each level, the inhabitants gorge themselves, and less is left for the people on the lower levels. Once the platform reaches the bottom, it shoots back up to the top to be cleared and filled for the next day. Any attempts to hoard food lead to the room either superheating or freezing. Every month, the pair of inhabitants are gassed and moved to another floor in their sleep. People are sent to live here or volunteer for the long term. Each person is also allowed 1 item to carry with them.
Goreng learns these rules from his first roommate, the elderly Trimagasi. His item is a knife, and when they are sent to a low level where there is no food, Trimagasi attempts to eat Goreng, but is killed by Miharu, a silent woman who rides the platform down every month, allegedly looking for her child and murdering whoever she's paired up with. Goreng suffers hallucinations of Trimagasi taunting him. The following month, Goreng is paired with Imogiri, who is actually the interviewer who allowed him to enter the pit in the first place. Imogiri tries to be fair and to ration out the food by dividing it into portions. She's convinced that if it's all equally divided, no one will starve below. She fails in this, though, until Goreng threatens those on the lower levels. She kills herself once the two are moved to the lowest level thus far, allowing Goreng to live by eating her corpse. However, she then joins Trimagasi in his hallucinations. Goreng then lives on level 6, the highest level thus far, with Bharat, an excitable man whose item is a rope that he believes will let him climb out, although the people on level 5 try to kill him when he attempts it. Goreng and Bharat decide to ride down with the platform, forcibly rationing the food with makeshift weapons, until they decide that a message needs to be sent to the people preparing the food. They choose to have 1 dish return intact as a symbol of defiance, but then they find Miharu's daughter on the lowest floor. Seeing that the child is special, they choose to send her up as the message, as Goreng seemingly reconciles with his visions of Trimagasi in the movie ends.
So there's an insane amount to unpack with this movie.
Absolutely. It's only a little over 90 minutes, but there's so much depth to the world building and so many interactions. You know, for a movie that's just about pairs of roommates, Goreng meets a lot of people.
A lot of differing people, though, too. Like, none of them, they're all so different and odd from each other that it's a good thing, you know, all these different interactions. What was your first impression when you, like, opening scene, you know, you see him in this small room, you know, with an old guy? Like, what was your very first impression?
When I saw him wake up and he looks over to Trimagasi, we can kind of understand that Goreng only has a faint idea of what's happening by all the questions that he's asking the old man. And we can, because of this stark concrete room, it looks like this brutalist prison cell. We can understand that he's in a bad spot. And we know from the attitude that Trimagasi has, this really like jaded, cynical guy, that Goreng might not last long here.
Did you find that Trimagasi was just cynical, or do you think he was just being realistic? Because, I mean, it seemingly he's been there for quite some time.
I think that the movie kind of gives us attitudes of different people toward the place. I think that Trimagasi is definitely on like the cynical hard end of things. When you compare him to Imogiri, who's trying to be like this humanitarian person and trying to, you know, convince people to share, or compared to Bharat, who's trying to, you know, be optimistic and get out of there, I think that you can definitely say that he's on the cynical side of things. But you definitely have a point. This is a hard life. And when he says that he doesn't think Goreng is going to make it, that's just his honest assessment of things.
What was the exact thing? You're a good person. I don't think you'll survive very long here.
Yeah, you have a good heart. I appreciate you. I don't think that you're going to survive long here, but I appreciate you. And what is so odd is that in many ways, I think that their initial relationship is almost kind of typical, from what you might expect from like a grandpa. You know, Trimagasi is around that age. He's kind of grumpy, but he is fond of this, younger kid. And Goreng even like reads to him. He reads to him, and Trimagasi tells him kind of what it's like in here. When they find themselves against the wall, you recall what Trimagasi does.
Oh God! Did you cringe when he started cutting his flesh?
Oh, good. Okay, so to widen the scope out and explain, they find themselves on a low platform, and Trimagasi has him tied up. I mean, from his shoulders down to his feet, restrained to the bed, gagged. And I think that it's horrifying, but not just because he starts to cut him. I think it's also horrifying because he decides to wait. He's saying that we're going to be down here for a month. You can starve yourself out for about a week when you're my age. So I'm going to, kind of let you last as long as I can, but then I'm going to carve out a piece of you.
He's kind of kind, though. He kind of says, like, I'm going to do my best to stay away from, like, the vital organs. I'll try not to cut your certain parts of the male anatomy. Like, I'll stay away from all that. Like, and he even offers at one point, like, you can have some of the meat, too, if you want. Like, you can eat some of yourself.
That's true. And I think that kind of heightens the horror aspect of it. Now, I guess opinions can kind of differ as to whether this is a horror movie or not. Personally, I didn't find it all that scary. I thought it was definitely depraved, but I didn't get that sort of primal reaction from it. But I did see, the suspense for Goreng in all of this that was happening. And the sort of twisted nature where Trimagasi tries to be caring in this, sick way by saying, I'm only going to cut parts of you at a time. I'm going to try to make sure you don't bleed out. And it's funnily enough that you say that he's being kind when he offers him, his own meat. That's actually one of the main differences between the English dub and the Spanish original. I managed to see it in both. I think that in the English dub, they kind of tried to play up the villainous horror of it, because the English dub has him saying, I'll even give you a bite. The voice actor is really trying to play that up. The Spanish dub, though, he barely sounds different than that sort of grandfatherly tone that he had started with.
What's it called? Goreng, we should mention the reason why he started all this. He went in so that he could get his wasn't it a diploma? A degree?
He was offered a degree, but when he's asked why he would want to go in, he says that he's trying to quit smoking and that he wants to read Don Quixote. And
he takes out a lot of his flesh. I don't remember how much it was.
He what?
How much of his flesh did he actually lose? I don't remember exactly how much it was.
It was one piece. It looked kind of like a sizable chunk, though. Think of sort of the palm of your hand. That's kind of what we're dealing with there.
Oh, man.
And people go in for different reasons. For instance, Trimagasi, he gets involved in this for a murder, but not like you might expect. His item is a knife. He was very quick to sort of tie up Goreng. This was not, the work of a killer, though. He threw a TV out of a window, and it hit a bicyclist. And that's how he got into the pit. That's how he became this sort of creature who's still trying to be human, I suppose, but who has definitely adapted to this horrible world.
I read one review that compared him almost to like a Spanish version of Hannibal Lecter to a slight degree, where he doesn't have the slickness or like the coolness of a Hannibal Lecter, but he kind of has that classiness, if that makes sense.
I don't necessarily know about that. And of course, the only reviews I read are my own. No.
which you can
Uh,
read at therollback.net.
yes, you can. Yes, you can. No, but I didn't quite catch the Lecter vibe from him because I think that part of what the filmmakers were trying to do here is just have him as sort of like a grumpy old man, someone that you've seen, you're familiar with 1,000 times before. Lecter, to me, stands out. He's kind of special in the way that he does things. Like you said, he's got a slickness and a charm. Trimagasi doesn't really have any of that. He'll, talk a good game, but he mostly does that when he's Goreng's hallucination.
I kind of drew a slight comparison, going back to Goreng for a moment, how he agreed to do it for his degree and all this other stuff. Did you get kind of an impression of like, this reminds me of college? Agreed to sell some of your soul for a few years, and in exchange, here's your degree. Good luck, kid.
Yep. You definitely have that, pound of flesh exchange going on. Trimagasi even says at one point that it's no small thing to earn your degree, almost as if he's saying, this is not that bad of a deal when you really think about it. I think you could definitely see a lot of metaphor if you were looking for it in this movie. I'd like to credit the director Galder Castelo Urrutia for that, because he has a lot of symbolism laid out. Right from the start, what stood out to me was that the first few levels, they gorge themselves, right? They eat whatever they want. In a few shots, you even see them like stepping on the food. And there's one shot actually of Goreng drinking from a cup, only to discover that it's urine. Someone up above, was careless or malicious in that. I think that that's a really good analogy for like the current state of global resources and global food, wherein you have certain nations, certain parts of the world that are able to have as much as they want and are kind of known for their excess, and meanwhile certain other people go hungry.
The U.S.?
I mean, that's the classic
Western
example,
culture,
right?
I guess, in general.
Yeah, we definitely aren't the only ones. I mean, you could make a similar argument for any number of nations. But yeah, I mean, you could just slap on, Western civilization. You'd slap on, the first world onto it. There are nations of plenty and there are nations of little. And that's, I think, part of what the director Galder was doing with this metaphor. The people at the top get everything, literally speaking here.
Do you think, did you feel it was as heavy-handed as I did? Because to me, it was like dead-ass obvious from when Trimagasi, when he tells Goreng at one point, the people up top won't talk to you, you're below them. And when Goreng tries speaking to the people below, don't talk to them, they're below us.
Yes.
And how arbitrary it is.
That is definitely heavy-handed. This is, you did the research on this one. This is Galder's first time out. I think that that's definitely something to consider here. Maybe the subtlety comes later. But what other part seemed pretty heavy-handed to me was the biblical imagery of it all. Several times, people will talk to Goreng and say to his face that he is the Messiah or a savior, or they'll mock him by saying that he's not multiplying the loaves and fishes, or they'll use biblical language to describe cannibalism. And the fact that Goreng, at the end of things, ends up looking like Jesus. He has that same kind of hairstyle that you see Jesus depicted with in movies. His face is covered with blood, a la Passion of the Christ. And he's trying to give, food to the hungry. I thought all of that was extremely heavy-handed. Did you see a lot of those kind of religious implications in the film?
I didn't see the religious ones as much as I saw the Don Quixote ones. Don Quixote, for any of our viewers that, fell asleep during English class, and don't worry, I know there's a lot of you out there. The night that, and feel free to correct me on my summary, basically he's a knight that he's delusional. He sees windmills as giant monsters. He's a knight from a different time. He has all these manners. He speaks in a certain way. He acts, as an ancient knight. But in modern, I use quotation marks, modern was it Spain? Latin America.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's Spain, and it's definitely it's old to us, right? But at the time it was being written, knights were like out.
Yeah.
He definitely is delusional, like you mentioned. And yeah, I think it's really interesting too that that's the book that Goreng picked. I think that I hadn't gotten it until you mentioned it, but I think that's kind of the other side of the coin. If people call Goreng like a messiah, but at the same time they mock him for what he's trying to do, then he's kind of a modern day Don Quixote. He's trying to impose like order and kindness on the system that is just fundamentally cruel. He's a fool like that knight is.
We've been talking about Goreng, Trimagasi for a while. I got a question. So Imagiri, if people don't remember, or Imagiri is the one that actually interviewed Goreng, and she somehow, some way, ended up in the pit as well. She brought her dog.
That was the item. Her item was her wiener dog, and Goreng at this point, he's seen Trimagasi try to murder him. He's seen Miharu kill the guy. He's eaten Trimagasi to survive and had these hallucinations of him. So Goreng is pretty seasoned at this point. And when he sees Imogiri, who brought a dog along with her, something else that needs to be fed, he gives the line, "You shouldn't have brought a wiener dog here. In here, that's more wiener than dog." He's kind of taking on the cynicism of Trimagasi a bit. I think that part of it's weird that he kind of takes on the trait of Trimagasi after having, cannibalized him. Imogiri is a really interesting character to me because, she's the interviewer. She was the one who decided that Goreng should get to enter. And she's also, I think, our biggest hint toward the outside world. At the beginning of the movie, if you'll recall, before we even see Goreng, we see sort of a head waiter, a head chef, going through this really complex, industrial yet luxury kitchen. And he's inspecting every single aspect of the food, looking for perfection in everything. He has people, bring him dishes to inspect them closely and to waft. And he checks in on every part of the process. But we don't know we don't know who he is. We don't know what organization they're a part of until we get to the part with Imogiri.
Yeah, she explains it's what, like a social experiment of some sort, not necessarily an actual prison. Well, apparently at least when it came to Trimagasi, he had the choice after that murder. It was either go to an insane asylum or go to the pit.
Exactly. Now, Imogiri, she worked for the government, what was called the administration. And she basically said, I worked for them for over 25 years, and they aren't evil. And when she got cancer, she decided that she had to go in because she knew that people were kind of using their own self-interest in there, and she wanted to get them to work together. That's why she wants to ration all the food out so that no one goes hungry, because she believes that, the administration is doing a good thing. And yeah, part of the theories surrounding the pit are that it's a social experiment for, how to see how people cooperate in a desperate situation. Or, this is Goreng's take, how to stop people from cooperating, how to keep them controlled using scarce resources.
What is, he just managed to control them for a very, very, very short amount of time. I think, it might be wrong, it might be when they're on level 6, where he says, he's talking to the people on the lower floor, as they're gorging themselves on the food, and he says, if you just eat your own portion, it'll be enough. And they're telling him, screw you, you don't know, we were just in the lower levels, we could have died or whatever. And at one point, he threatens to defecate all over the food if they don't agree to only eat their fair portion, which works for a level or two. But I think it's Imogiri who actually makes the point: you can't shit upward. Like, you can't force people above you to listen. It can only work from the way down. But unless you can get the very top to listen, it's not going to mean anything.
Well, and Imogiri, it should be noted, she's tried this on her own at this point for a few days, and kind of you almost get the sense that Goreng, as much as trying to do the right thing, is also just tired of the daily shouting match, because he shouts down the people below, and then he threatens to ruin all of their food. He says that I'm not going to leave a grain of rice untouched, so that you can't eat it every day. Imogiri wanted to ration according to reason. She was trying to persuade people and use her words to get them to agree willingly. But Goreng, from his time there, or just out of anger, realizes that the only way to get people to do something that isn't in their best interest is to threaten them, is to make it so that they have no choice but to obey, and they're more afraid of the consequences than they want to do, their self-serving thing.
And, I believe he's actually, he's quoted at one point when so I'm going to jump forward a little bit, when Goreng and Baharat?
The H is silent, Barat.
So when Goreng and Barat go and start going down the levels to try and enforce the whole, hey, if we only eat what we have to, like portioning out the food, they go down by force, and then one level, an old man tells him, you need to win them with your words. You can't use brutal force. You need to try and win them first, and if it doesn't work, then use force only when necessary.
Right. He says, education has to come first, convince, and then, force. But I think that this goes back to the whole duality of the biblical motifs and then using Don Quixote, right, which is a mockery. I think that God there was trying to make a sort of double-sided point there, where he has this older wise man say that you should try to convince people before you use the sticks on them. That works for perhaps one level until they meet someone who says, screw you guys on your words, and then they're back to just hitting everyone up until level 50.
And I remember those fight scenes were really kind of brutal.
I would say that they're brutal in that they're fairly realistic, because the one lady who starts this off, she says, screw you guys. She starts to eat something. Goreng hits her on the head once, and she goes down, and we don't see her ever get back up again, because he's got an iron rod, and the human skull is not that tough.
Oh, it was a pentacata. Do you remember that?
Barat and Goreng go down, and the old man, as part of what he says, is, try to open up with words, but he also mentions that they need to send a message to the people on level 0, the hypothetical highest level where the food comes from. And that message is one perfect dish that everyone has somehow managed to restrain themselves not from eating. The panna cotta.
That's right. And do you ever... So the panna cotta was supposed to be the symbol to I guess, level 0 of hey, we are better than you. We're better than this. We're better overall. Even after they've been injured, after all these brutal brawls and these fights. At the very bottom level, they encounter a little girl, a child. Miharu. It may have been Miharu's. Although there's kind of a twisted... I don't know. I just don't see how a child could possibly live there. Be born in that hellhole and survive to be, 9?
Yeah, 7 to 9, maybe. And that kind of goes into Miharu. So essentially, Imogiri, as the interviewer, knows a lot of these people and has chosen a lot of these people. Miharu, the story that Goreng initially hears about her is that she's after her child. Imogiri says that she's actually just an actress, that she doesn't have a child, that she came in alone, and that the pit doesn't even allow children inside of it. So at that point, he goes from thinking that, she's a mother on a mission, even if she does kill, to thinking that this person is just insane and has made up some story because she's had a psychotic break. Until finally, Baran and Goreng go down to floor 333, I believe it is, and they find her.
Yeah, and it turns out she wasn't fucking lying.
Yeah, I think that I think there are a couple of possibilities here. One, and this is, I guess, sort of the what I would call the least impressive way to present the information, is that it was all a hallucination. That Goreng, in one of the many fights that they had, is losing just too much blood, and none of it is real, right? He wanted the child to be real because he had, these feelings, this fondness for Miharu. At one point, he has a sex fantasy about Miharu. So obviously, he's feeling some kind of a fondness or a Stockholm syndrome, maybe, for her, and he wants her to not have been lying after she dies. So it could be a hallucination, or it could be one of the things that we have to kind of give the film. Like, for instance, at the end, what they do is they send Miharu's kid up on the platform, but the speed that platform goes, there aren't any straps. As soon as that thing stopped, anything that's on it just gets launched into the ceiling. Guaranteed.
I'm sure it slows down at the top. I mean...
Oh, I don't know. Humans were not meant to ride that thing. Also... we also would have to, kind of ignore the fact that the food on the table is not even enough to feed, 100 people. Let alone Imogiri saying that, there's 200 levels, 400 people, we can ration it out so that there's enough. That food would not feed 100 people reasonably, even if they were rationed. So it may just be something that we have to give the film, because Imogiri, she claims all this knowledge about the pit, but obviously, even after 25 years, she doesn't know the administration very well. She says there are 200 levels, and then one day they wake up on the 202nd level, which is when she hangs herself. And she says that, they would never allow a child in, but here we have, this, elementary school-aged person.
I don't know. I wonder if it really was her child or not. And also that makes me wonder, how the hell could that kid survive in there unless it was from the pity of others or, let the bodies hit the floor, which we didn't even mention that. All the suicides that happen at the beginning of each month when people find out, oh, hey, I went from floor 38 down to floor 250. Bye. And, I mean, they pull a good old-fashioned suicide jump.
But Trimagasi explains it. He says that if Goreng believes in God, then he should pray that they get on the middle levels. Because with the middle levels, you don't starve, but you have something to look forward to every day. The people at the very top have too much time to think, and they kill themselves. The people at the very bottom have nothing to eat, and so they kill themselves. So, yeah, we see that is a strategy. Trimagasi talks about that as well, having, found a jumper.
What's called? Wasn't there a scene, I don't know if I recorded it, there's 3 kinds of people. Those on the top, those on the bottom, and those who fall?
Exactly. Yeah, that is the opening line to the movie. We see it as Goreng opens his eyes for the first time. And I think that, I think that we see kind of every perspective. And what's interesting is that Trimagasi is the one who's saying that but he doesn't quite account for everyone because there are also the people who are just completely outside of the system. We see very rarely, but a couple of times in the film, the chefs, the people who run level 0, the ones who are in charge of feeding the whole pit. I think that's part of what makes the panna cotta such a, arguably even a better symbol than the girl, because almost midway through the movie, I believe, that head chef is taking a panna cotta and he's going around to everyone. He has all of his, his subordinate chefs lined up, drill formation, and he's holding the hair that's on the panna cotta to each one of them to decide who to punish. So the fact that these people in this situation would be able to get a perfect panna cotta up when he couldn't even do that in his kitchen, I think would have been a better symbol than the girl.
I mean, honestly, I think that may have been one of the only things that disappointed me in this entire film was the fact that they kind of copped out by using a child as the symbol, because it feels like it didn't feel like it was earned or that it should have been there. It felt more like
kind of out of nowhere.
Exactly. I don't want that. I want this whole thing to feel as earned as it should be.
Exactly. And the fact that Grang sort of arbitrarily decides not to go with the child, who is almost certainly going to, maybe splat in the ceiling. But alternatively, she's going to get to level 0, and at the very best, she grows up as a chef for them. Not much has changed whatsoever. I also thought that the ending was kind of poor in how it was handled. Goring basically is talked out of it by Tremagasi, and they go off into the darkness that is, level 334, the lowest level. I'm sure that it's all very symbolic, but the actual plot of the film didn't really support that ending. One thing that Godler used that I appreciated was that these people all have one item, one object left from society that they've left behind. So other than the food and the water, they don't have many ways to interact with other people. So a lot of the film is just really crude in using bodily functions against people. I mean, you see this when Tremagasi urinates on the people below him, or how the people, when Bharat is climbing up, defecate on him. It really shows this sort of animalistic side of people to take everything away from them except for this one object.
What would you have taken with you if you were in the pit? If you knew you were going to have to go in and spend the next 12 months in there for your university, for your degree, what would you have taken with you? Do you think you would even be able to survive it?
I would have taken a gun with 12 bullets, because they mentioned that. They say people take all sorts of things. People take guns. People take crossbows. We never see a gun, though.
I mean, wouldn't it be easy to kill you, though?
To kill me? I have a gun.
No, but I mean, if someone manages to get a hold of the gun,
why would they manage to get a hold of the gun? They're dead. You're
asleep at some point.
Yeah, they sleep first. Permanently.
You really think you'd be able to murder that many people that fast?
Look, all I'm saying is, first of the month, a gunshot wakes everyone up. I eat peacefully.
And if you're on the lower levels?
Well, I mean, I pull a Tremagasi, I guess.
You're a sick, demented man, and you have my pity.
Yeah, you asked how I would survive. What would you bring with you? Your dog?
My what?
Your dog?
Fuck no, a samurai sword. To me, that was the best weapon.
That's true. I would agree that's the best weapon in the film because
There's no reload time.
Guns in there.
The what?
Because there's no guns in there.
Exactly. There's no reload time.
Why would I have to reload? You only get one object. You understand that, right? It's not like you get, a gun and then a clip. That's two things. I want a gun with 12 bullets.
No, but that's 13 items. That's the gun and then the 13 bullets.
Yeah, well, the sword is the blade in the hilt, so...
So who's nitpicking now, motherfucker?
Exactly. You know what my item is? My item is Wolverine claws, okay?
Wait, sir, we don't have the technology to surgically, input them and add them on.
Then I'm not going in the pit, am I? My one item, give it to me.
Give it to me or I quit.
I beat the administration.
No. You can't beat the administration. They're the administration.
The administration. It's all bureaucracy.
This film, as it stands right now, has an 83% positive rating on Rotten Tomato. What's your final verdict on this film? Do you like it? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was meh? Would you watch it again?
I would watch it again. I've seen it twice now. I would probably give it another shot just to see, if there was anything that I had missed, what I could come back for with more depth on the second time around. Overall, it's a fairly strong film. It's got some good ideas, but it goes too far in some places. The writing isn't necessarily consistent as with the ending, and a lot of the images also don't necessarily follow. They aren't consistent themselves. Like, for instance, when Goring is called the Messiah in so many different ways, it makes you think, well, there should be kind of messianic symbolism around him. But a lot of that just is not consistent. I would give this film a B.
Really? That sounds kind of generous for you.
I can like some movies.
Wait, so just so I'm clear on this, Birds of Prey gets a C, but this shit gets a B?
Oh, Birds of Prey definitely gets a C.
God, fuck you. Fair enough.
What would you give the Platform?
Platform, honestly, I'd give it a C. I don't think I'd watch it again. I liked it, I enjoyed it, but I didn't really feel a lot of the rewatch value. By no means is it a bad film. By no means is it poorly acted. It just, I don't feel like there's a lot of rewatchability in it. It was good where it is, though. It's a hell of a debut. And I would watch more. I'd watch another film from this director. One thing I forgot to mention was, I'm sure you can give your feedback on this. It was also compared to a Samuel Beckett play, in particular Endgame. What did you think of that? Are you familiar with that work, or?
Endgame by Samuel Beckett?
Yes.
That one I don't know. The only Samuel Beckett play I know is, the one that I'm sure everyone knows, which is Waiting for Godot. Now, Waiting for Godot, it's... How to put it? Just fuck it. No, I don't know. Just don't put in the rest. I don't want to talk about Waiting for Godot.
Jesus.
Hated that play.
Funny enough, Samuel Beckett's actually where I got I'm going to mention that later. So, anyway, it was compared to a Samuel Beckett play, which I kind of see. You-ish see?
I've only seen Waiting for Godot by Beckett. I suppose I can see some of those same motifs at work here.
Oh shit. Do you have anything else to say? No, and this is, I'm cutting this part. Is there anything else that we have to say about this film? If you're listening to us on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe.
If you're listening to us via podcast, please subscribe. We'd greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to hear more about our thoughts on movies, go to therollback.net. I've been Eddie.
And I've been Alex. And this was The Rollback.
All right. So next Monday, me and Jose are going to be recording the My Hero Academia episode.
Can I come along?
Bet your ass you can.